not very many. You should go to more. You can come to one tomorrow night at Kieran's Irish Pub where I run a story slam, much like this, but with storytellers. You too could tell stories. And if you're having a good time tonight, come out next Tuesday to Kieran's, as we will be piecing together the rest of the Twin Cities Unified Poetry Slam team at our Grand Slam there. So Tuesday, 8 p.m. at your home in Minneapolis. So I have, who out there's written stuff before? Like poems, stories, cool. Have you ever like written something, you're right, you're like, you can't really say, have you written something where you're like, I was totally in the right, and then you write it down and you're like, oh, maybe I was a huge fuck up in this situation, right? That might be the story, I haven't decided, so you guys can weigh in later. So here we go. The first time I talked to my boyfriend's mom, it was because she was calling me at 6:30 in the morning. I was driving home to sleep for the first time in 48 hours, and she was shouting into the phone, "You hussy." She called me a hussy, and she said, "It is your fault that my son is laying in the hospital dying. The doctors say you have a dog. He is so allergic to dogs. You must have forced him to get it, and now he's going to die, you hussy." I break down in tears of exhaustion. Yes, we have a dog, but he's fine with it. It's not the dog's fault, I tell her. 2 days earlier, I got a call at work from my boyfriend, and he was wheezing, and he said I had to pick him up because he was having an asthma attack he couldn't get under control. I lived a half hour away from the hospital, so I called a friend closer who took him to HCMC. And by the time I arrived there, the doctors were waiting for me, and they led me like royalty to a private room, which is never good when you're in the hospital. And there, they told me that they had to put my boyfriend into a medically induced coma so he wouldn't have died because they couldn't get his asthma under control. I was heartbroken. I called my parents and they were going to come right away, but I had no way to call his. He hadn't spoken to them in years. He didn't have their phone numbers in their phone. And 2 days later, a nurse had some old records faxed over to the hospital, and it had his mom listed as an emergency contact. So she called that number, and it was still live. And she told her that his son, who she hadn't seen in years, was in a coma because he had a really bad asthma attack because he lived with his girlfriend and they had a dog that he was allergic to. And that is when I received that call. And even though I was outwardly confident that this coma was not the professor's, our dog's fault, inwardly I was much less sure. Earlier in the spring, I had decided that there's something missing from my life, something that can only be filled with the love of a puppy. And I knew he was allergic, so I spent a lot of times researching hyperallergenic dogs and which dogs are best for asthma. And at first, he wouldn't even have the conversation with me about it, but I wore him down, showing him pictures of puppies every day when he got home from work and cute videos all the time. And my research eventually showed that we should get a dog with hair and not fur, and we should get a small dog because they make less dander, so we should get a tiny Yorkie Terrier. I decided that we should meet some Yorkies to see if they were going to set off his asthma. This was tricky though, because we couldn't go to the pound because certainly the other dogs would set off his asthma, and we couldn't go to the pet store for the same reason, and we really shouldn't go to somebody's house because they might have carpets or other allergens that would set his asthma off. So eventually, I found a friend of a friend who lived with a bunch of Yorkies, and I convinced her to bring them to her office building on a Saturday morning so we could meet them in her office. So Saturday, we drove to Woodbury, and we locked ourselves in a 6x6 office with 4 little fluffy dogs. And we shut the door, and I told him, "Come on, get in there, pet those dogs. I mean, really, like, rub your face on it and see if you die." And his nose was running, and he was sneezing, and I told him, "It's cool, I know where the urgent care is closest to here if it gets really bad." But we stayed with them for a full hour, and there was no asthma. You know, for the runny nose, he could take Benadryl. "We can get a dog," I pronounced. We were still a little bit nervous, so I wanted to find a puppy where we can sort of trial him and return him if it didn't work out. Surprisingly, most people did not want to work with us in this kind of arrangement. But eventually, I found a woman who said we could adopt one of her puppies. I just had to bring my boyfriend with to prove he was not allergic when we picked it up. That was going to present a challenge, as she had 8 dogs living in her house. And she had carpet, which he's sort of allergic to all the time, so it wasn't ideal. But the day came, and we were pumped, so I told him to take all the Benadryl he could without passing out. And then we drove to the house, and I looked at him and I said, do not sneeze, don't you dare sneeze. And we got in and we were meeting all the dogs, and I could see his nose was starting to run. So I tried to walk so the woman would follow me so he could wipe his nose on his sleeve without making any noise. And our dog was the first one to leave the litter. And his parent dogs knew something was up, and they put the puppy in the corner of the room and they stood in front of him. And when I started walking to pick up our puppy, the parents started howling out loud, like they knew they were never going to see their son again. And then the woman started crying, saying she hadn't expected it to be so hard to get rid of the puppies, and she knew she couldn't keep all of them, but still there was tears and there was howling, and I started crying because I felt really bad, and my boyfriend started crying because his nose was running so hard, and I scooped the puppy out, and we ran outside, and he started sneezing, and we were proud doggy parents. We had the professor for 2 months before this asthma attack, so I didn't really think it was completely the dog's fault, but he may have contributed to it, and I didn't know if my boyfriend would want to come home to this dog. He was in that coma for 14 more days. They were the worst days of my life. And when he woke up, one of the first things he said was that the professor was going to have to go live someplace else. But the next night, he called me in the middle of the night to tell me that he missed the professor and I should stick him in my purse and sneak him into the hospital. And then he called me back 10 minutes later to say, no, I shouldn't do that because somebody else on the floor might be allergic to dogs. And when he finally came home, his mom was the one who brought him. She greeted our dog happily for the first time. And he scooped up our puppy and let him lick his face for the very first time. And the 3 of us have been living happily together for the last